Alright, Hebdo Gamers, it is Friday. It's been a hot minute since I did an actual proper video, and I am getting back into the swing of things. So I figured why not go back to an old classic and do another video on Magic. So that's what we're doing. But we are going to be doing something a little different from my normal Magic videos. Normally I would simply talk about one particular card and its value as a commander and look at what kind of list you want to run with it, and all that's well and good. But I sort of realized that it's kind of limiting in terms of what I can do per video in covering cards. So I'm gonna keep. I am gonna continue making plans for that, but I also wanted to add in some extra little fun tidbits on the side, which are a little bit less taxing, but also are able to cover a wider array of um, topics. So today we are going to be covering a list of commanders that make you feel terrible by making others feel terrible by Friday. So how I am doing this video is, title aside, is I am looking at 5 commanders that are in no particular order um, can be considered relatively toxic or frustrating to play against. And this is by no means an objective judgment of any one card. I am simply speaking from a combination of experience firsthand and what I have seen from others in terms of their own experiences. So if you play any of these commanders, take this with a grain of salt. Just because someone plays these commanders doesn't mean they're automatically like toxic or you know a bad experience on the game. But I do feel like some of these commanders, or at least these 5, can definitely create that kind of environment if you are looking to create that kind of environment. And you'd be surprised how many people would try to create that kind of environment. Um, you'll see what I mean. Anyway, we're just gonna get into it. So the first one I wanted to look at is Ululek. Now, Ululek is a really fun card because it's the first commander that I can think of that gives you access to all the colors in Magic while also being an Eldrazi tribal commander. Like specifically Eldrazi tribal. So like you could run like Morathon in some strange hybrid setup. Uh, but like this is the first commander that I've seen that actually takes the idea of like pure colorless Eldrazi tribal and infuses it with the ability to make use of the colors in Magic. Um, but the main takeaway from this, surprisingly, is actually its triggered ability, which has that so that whenever you cast an Eldrazi, you can pay 2 colorless mana, and if you do, you copy all spells, so including the spell that you're casting, and then copy all other activated and triggered abilities. And then you choose new targets for the copies. So how this works is whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, be it a creature or a tribal, whatever, you pay 2 colorless mana, and then you copy that spell, but then you also copy all abilities that may have been activated on the stack or have been triggered as a result of you casting that spell. With the exception of mana abilities, of course. Now, this sounds really fun, but you run into a kind of an issue here. It's definitely not the worst I've ever seen, but you could run into the potential issue of simply having a bunch of stuff. I like to think of it as like the Simic landfall effect, where it becomes very easy to start taking disproportionately long turns with no real definitive answer. It's I like to imagine it as more of like a win more card, except cranked up to 11, where now everything you're doing is now like a win more situation. I think Juladok is a really good example of this. So if you have Juladok out with Ulek and you cast a big spell, like a big Eldrazi spell, so it activates your dock. You pay the 2 colorless mana to copy that, so you now start cascading a bunch of times. Doing that kind of thing, especially with the kind of mechanics that Cascade is and how you can pay mana to copy the stuff that you're cascading, you run into a situation where you have a ton of choices and a ton of triggers that are happening at the exact same time, and you create a turn dynamic in which you have so much to do, and the time that it takes for you to make those decisions and just resolve everything means that it feels like you're playing the game less as opposed to just sort of like you're managing your deck as opposed to playing it, if that makes sense. That's not to say that Eldrazi isn't fun and Ululek isn't fun. I actually love the idea of Ululek and Juladok and would love to build them as like a colorless commander. But point is, it's very easy to fall into that trap, right? Um, I don't have too much to say about this one. But anyway, the next one I wanted to look at is Tifa. Now, Tifa is a very recent commander, only came out in Final Fantasy, so again, I'm not going to have too much to say about Tifa, but what I can say is I feel like Tifa can potentially be annoying for the exact opposite reason that Ulek can be considered annoying, and that Ulek can make your turns incredibly long and have a bunch of stuff going on. It's sort of like disengage, um, sort of just disengage, the rest of your table. Tifa, on the other hand, isn't. I would think can be annoying or toxic simply due to the fact of how urgently she is a threat to everyone. And I say this because of one simple trick that 9 out of 10 doctors do not recommend, and that is fetch lands. So the deal with the deal with Tifa is she's a landfall commander, and the really good thing about Tifa having being a 1/2 with trample is that whenever a land enters, you double Tifa's power for that turn. Now, obviously, if you only play one land in a turn, it's not going to be very good for you. It's just going to be a 2/2 with trample. But we're not looking at a 2/2 with trample because A, we're in mono green, which means we're going to have a lot of opportunities to make extra lands happen. And two, fetch lands exist, which means that you get 2 free activations of the landfall ability, even off of the one. So with a fetch land, you're looking at bare minimum 2 doubles, which makes this a 4/2, which is again not that much of an issue, right? 4/2 triple, nothing crazy. The problem is when you start to see extra lands come into play. That's when you can start to see this crop up as a problem. It's like if that makes sense. I don't know where I'm going with this. This was sort of like a shoehorn in. I'm scared of Tifa. Um, if you run Tifa, you can disregard this. I just think she's scary. Anyway, we'll move on to the moving on to a classic. If anyone, I mean, I imagine it's pretty easy to disagree with me on Tifa being annoying, but I think it's pretty hard to argue that Augustin is an annoying piece of work in terms of a commander. Augustin is a classic example of a prized piece of stacks in the command zone. It quite literally just makes all of your stuff way cheaper while making stuff your opponents cast harder to cast. And this falls directly into the classic stacks package where, oh, look at that, you're in blue, you have stuff like propaganda, you have stuff like counterbalance, so you have access to counter spells and delaying your opponents from doing anything. You have access to white, so you have access to cheap alternative removal, you have access to, I mean, white is the poster child of stacks. You're just like the ultimate pillow fort commander, and you run into a situation where your turns might not necessarily be too long, but everyone else's turns are going to become unnecessarily and arbitrarily long as a result of them not having options like they expect to. And that's perfectly fine because that's part of your game plan. But it also creates an environment in which people don't necessarily feel like they're playing their game as opposed to having to find a way to manage around you. All the while, because you're playing stacks, you're not doing too much aside from stopping other people from playing their game. So it's like the whole deck is designed to make sure that everyone plays the game less. And I know that that sounds like a total gruel thing for me to say, but I mean, I'm a gruel player, so you know, take it as you will. Point is, this guy's smelly. I don't like him. Anyway, Avacyn. She's phenomenal. 8 mana, 8/8. Flying Vigilance gives everything indestructible. Phenomenal. As a green players rejoice. I am one of them. However, um, everything being indestructible just means that board wipe tribal is on the table. And look, board wipes are good. Board wipes are always good. I'm not going to be one of those people to say that you should never have removal in your decks. Removal is objectively good. However, you using your own invulnerability to justify the mass destruction of everything all of your other players hold dear is diabolical. There is no redemption for you. Seek help. But either way, yes. I'd say I think you definitely make the argument that Avacyn without Armageddon or like Board Wipe Tribal is not nearly as toxic as Avacyn with Board Wipe Tribal. So I think specifically the Board Wipe Tribal Avacyn would be like a case where I'd be like, yeah, that's just toxic as shit. um, but yeah, anyway, Send triplets. Oh my goodness, where do I even start? Send triplets. First of all, we got the classic colors. If you've noticed anything about this whack video, is that most of the commanders that I've looked at have had kind of a theme of colors and things that they do that sort of out them as annoying. And this is sort of like the poster child of that. Um, this creature by itself doesn't do very much. They're 3/3 with no ability keywords. In combat, they're basically useless. However, while your turn, you might not see too much from them. Your opponent's turns, they become super valuable because during your turn you choose someone, and then on their turn, uh, or I'm tripping. I forgot what this card does. No, sorry. This card essentially gives your turn the ability to completely mess with someone by looking at their hand and playing spells from their hand, and lands too, which is evil. Now, the thing with this is that if this is actually really this is actually a commander that can be, I think, can be piloted really well, especially if you understand the kind of things that you need during uh, any sort of position you're in your game plan with any pod. It's a very adaptable commander because it gives you access to a whole bunch of different things depending on the play group you're in, uh, the power level. It's a very adaptable commander. It also has the potential to be incredibly toxic. It demands a little bit more user input if you want to be super toxic with it. But I imagine any scenario in which you have the ability, um, and God forbid the incentive to consistently target one or two players and just mess with them by taking their stuff, definitely has the potential to be a super toxic commander. Um, and so yeah, so the verdict is these guys are toxic because they're them. That's all. They're the masters of your mind, I guess. They're yeah, goofy. Yeah, that's all I got for now. Um, I, as always, I am attempting to work on stuff and have it ready by Fridays, and I am going to try to have more stuff more consistently. At least, hopefully, hopefully, I do my best. Anyway, see ya.